Howdy folks, I'm Rebecca Jolly the Jolly Alchemist here today for a Neutrino forecast. And today we are looking at Tuesday, the 4th of November 2025. We have moved into Scorpio, and I don't say that very often because I'm not an astrologer, and I don't think about that part of the wheel, but I will show you that piece and you can see what it is that I'm talking about and how that fits into the human design concept. So I'm going to use the camera to show you the base details, and then we will talk and tell stories, and I will tell you something I figured out maybe to try. So let's look at these numbers. Okay. Today, then that, and that, and then 24. Here we go. And the rest of that. Sorry. There. Okay. So, all right, let me mount the camera here and then we can talk. So we're looking today at the 5th line of the 44th and 24th hexagram. The 44th being the situational awareness or organization of people, really looking at what's around you in terms of people resources so that those people resources can be managed in order to bring resources into the tribe and get that energy to the throat so that everything can be manifested. So that's what we're looking at there. And then on the earth side of the thing, we have the 24th gate in the middle here, looking towards gate 61, the mysteries of the universe, and the 24th gate is chewing on them over and over again. So what we see when we're looking at our left angle cross here, which is the cross of incarnation, we're seeing people who are providing for us a viewpoint on what it's like to come into the world over and over again. Now, what's happening here is this is the 3rd cross, or the 3rd version of this grouping that's hanging around gate 44. So gate 44, coming to meet, returning, looking at, again, chewing, yeah? Yeah. And so even though we're looking at 3 different crosses, we're looking at the 4 ways, we're looking at the cross of alertness, and now the cross of incarnation, they're all really studying on some level what it's like to have that 44th gate as a top activation. And of course, for those of us who are not carrying this energy, it's really about what is it like for us to look at this for 6 days or so. Yeah. The interesting thing that Ross says about this cross of incarnation and the 2nd version, so because we're in a left angle cross now, what we're looking at is a cross that only has 2 variations rather than the right angle like the 4 ways, which has 4 variations. So for those of you who are carrying the cross of the 4 ways, you have 4 different times throughout the year where that cross will be featured. Every single one of those gates will go through its time in the top position in the spotlight. And then the juxtaposition cross, of course, there's only one of them, and it has specifically to do with that 44th gate in this case. And then the left angle cross, it will only have two versions, and they will be mirrors of each other. But they're still all looking at those four same gates. Let me specify on that. Not all three of those crosses are looking at the four gates, because that's what makes the switch. In the case of coming to meet, the cross of the four ways, what's underneath it is 33 and 19. So for the cross of the four ways, the underlying supporting energy is going to be being alone and being aware of the needs of the community. Being alone, 33 is up here, yeah, connected to the throat. This is the gate of the retreat. And then 19 is going to be on the other side, coming here out of the root towards the emotional center in this channel of not registration, it's an R word, regulation. That's what it is, the channel of regulation there. So the needs of the community, are they being met? If they're not being met, then we need a revolution. And that's why you'll see there for me that red there, because that revolution aspect is part of my unconscious cross. But we're getting off track here, so focus. There's so many details. And then as you move into the juxtaposition and the left angle cross of incarnation, the underlying energy switches from the 33 and the 19 into the 13 and the 7, which, as I said before, but for those of you who weren't paying attention, the 7 is looking into the future and the nature of leadership, and the past is and the 13 is looking into the past and the nature of empathy and listening to others and figuring out what we learned from the past to help us move forward. It's all about moving forward, but in a more direct or indirect kind of way. Well, that's the difference there. So, okay, enough said about that piece. I was going to show you the wheel and about that, but I've already mounted the camera, so fuck that. We'll do that another time. It's interesting when we're getting into the actual looking at these gates here. 64 keys calls the 44th gate organization, well, line 5, organization. Ra calls it manipulation. Now, in order to talk about manipulation, you have to remember that we're removing judgment, so that this is not about somebody who has the power of manipulation being a bad person, or manipulation in itself being a bad thing. It's about, this is something that kind of needs to happen, especially in the tribe, especially with how our human, animal, meat societies are organized. It's always about some kind of a hierarchy. And Ra was specifically talking in the details, if you go in and read, the things I was showing you there, which you don't have to. But if you are pausing the video and reading all that junk that's the base materials, let me know. Tell me if you saw anything interesting there. Because ultimately, if that's not helpful, then I don't need to be spending the time in the video to show it. It doesn't matter. You can just take my word for it on the things that I tell you that I see that are going on. So, it's just, it helps me sculpt the videos to know what parts of the videos are helping people and what parts are not helping people. Just saying. So, back to this subject of manipulation. 64 Keys calls it organization, the instinctive recognition of patterns, and basically who's belonging where within the pattern. Yeah, so they're really looking to organize people and to understand where people are supposed to be sitting in the hierarchy so that they can put them there. The 44 is really geared to recognize the patterns of the 26 and to get that 26 in the right place so that it can do the right things that it needs to in the organization, even though the 44 itself might have a difficult time with the ego of the 26. So here we have in the fifth line the ultimate expression of that hexagram, or when people are looking at it, what they really want to see as the ultimate expression in that hexagram. So what that does is that gives that fifth line being a chance to live up to the projection. We have an idea when we're looking at you that you're going to be the one who is going to be able to organize this community properly, and then that fifth line being has a certain time in order to live up to that projection or not, to lose their reputation or to have their reputation grow in some significant way. And it's interesting, Ross says that this is a very important skill because we need to have, I'm paraphrasing here, but we need to have the little people be happy being little people. That's where the manipulation comes in, because that 44 line 5 personality is going to come in and say, okay, now I know, and the example he uses is bolting bolts into the sides of cars. I know your job is just screwing bolts into the sides of cars for 40 years, but it's a very important job. We really need you here. And so this is going to be the perfect place for you. And the other person says, okay, that's fine for me. I will spend those 40 years because I know that I'm doing something worthwhile. The 44 line 5 is really going to be able to look at those people and make them feel good about their job if they are doing their own job properly. And that could be seen as manipulation, or it just could be seen as helping the people who need to be in the position they need to be be happy in the position that they're in. Good sides, downsides, but of course, anytime we're talking about this channel where we are looking at the 44 and the 26, this is one of those extremely powerful people channels. And so you have to understand, if you carry an activation of anything in this channel, and you see I do as well, we'll be looking at my activation tomorrow in line 6. Then they have a responsibility to use that power for good. Do they always use it for good? No. When this goes awry, it becomes a dictatorial fiat, says Ra. It becomes, I have the power, you don't. You do what you're told because I tell you. I wonder if my father has that power, has that activation. I don't know. I'm just joking, but it's definitely an energy I've run across in my life. Of course, I also have in my life a Chiron wound of submitting to the will of others rather than doing my own will. And these Chiron wounds in all of us have been given to us since we were little children. So since I was a child, I was forced to submit. And that's why perhaps I'm having a little bit of a string there where the fiat energy is forcing people to submit. Anyway, moving into the 24, the thing that I thought was interesting about that energy, and maybe of some note, was, let's see, yes, confession, the courage to admit the mistakes of the past. Of course, in the detriment, it becomes not willing or not interested in admitting the mistakes of the past, and you get some attempt at justification instead of confession, which puts sort of a hamper on the actual growth, because sometimes you need to say, I didn't know that, so that's why I did what I did. Now I know. Oh, okay. Where was it? Who says, yeah. I know this now. The reason I did not know it before was that I had a problem before with this person, or I wasn't trained, I wasn't informed, and so I didn't know. But now I've had this returning, I've chewed on it, and now I have the ability to know the things that I didn't know before. It says, this is a natural process, but it means at the heart of every knower is the capacity to confess. Yeah? And he also says, this bit is interesting, it says a great deal about the fact that in the 2010, so that is this 20, this now gate from the throat connecting to the 10, this is I want to be in the now, or I want to be awake in the now, and then connecting to the 2551, which by the way is going to be connected today in the transit because of the moon going through the 51st gate. Where I was, yes, mystical channels that are part of the individuality process, there is a need to confess that they did not know. So, it's part of an awakening, it's part of something that we all have, but it's connected to this 24th gate because that 24th gate is going to keep on bringing us back again and again to look at it until we know it fully, until that mutation has carried and we're able to really see the mutation in the world and live with the mutation in the world. And that was the interesting thing that I thought Ra was saying in talking about the Incarnation Cross. Now, it's not in the Incarnation Cross, but he begins in the end of the Cross of Incarnation to discuss the next quarter. That's interesting. And it is true that here, while we're in the 44th gate, Shiza, I really do have to take the camera back off and show it to you. Let me show it to you what it is that we're looking at here. All right. So, here we have the wheel. And here we are at 44, the end of the third quarter process. So this quarter that we've been moving through, in every 6 days, we're focusing on a different gate there. Now we've moved to 44. And this one, you can see this thick line is showing us that we are at the end of the third quarter process. The third quarter, which came all the way from 7, all right, took us through all these issues of interpersonal relationships and growing and developing, meeting, breeding, and getting ready to have children. And as we say in this last cross, have the incarnation process, which repeats over and over again. And then from there on, we will be moving into the fourth quarter, which is all about mutation. So he talks about speaking. He starts to talk about the nature of what this fourth quarter holds for us individually and for the planet as a whole, which is quite interesting, I thought, and I will be reading some of that. But I wanted to, while we're here, swing around and say, look, here's how, God, what is it? Astrology, thank you. Astrology comes into it because ever since the end of the 50th gate, which would have been about approximately 2 weeks ago, we have been in the range of Scorpio, which is, of course, when we get to 43, where my very own birthday will be happening. But for now, we are here in 44, and of course, on the other side of that 44, when we're looking at the crosswise, we see, boom, the 24, and that's how that works. All right, so I'm going to switch again and tell you about my new idea. So here's my thing. I've been doing the trances long enough now that it's starting to be not as exciting as it used to be for me to say, a new cross, a new number, because for me, I've already looked at these things 2 and sometimes 3 times before, and so I'm just like, yeah, here we are again, talking about the same things, the same lines. Every first line is having something in common with every other first line of every hexagram. And so here, as we are starting into November, I'm just like, yeah, I've told you about the nature of the first line and the second line over and over again until for me, it starts to get boring. And that is because, of course, when it comes to my process for making money and really contributing to the world, I have a first line theme, which means I'm into analysis, which means I really, really want to dive deep and get into the foundations, which is why I keep saying over and over again that I really, really love to deep dive into people's charts. And that when somebody comes to see me, it gives me an opportunity to do a deep dive onto their charts. And that's lovely. That's, that's one part of it. And if you want me to do that for you, that's cool. Awesome. Drop me an email. Come see me at my website. We can talk about it. We can look into it. Those of you who have had a reading from me can chime in if you like and say how it was for you to be able to have that time exploring in a very deep diving kind of way into what it is that is going on in your individual chart and your individual energy. But I thought what might make it a little more exciting for me is to take some time and I spent a lot of time today. Yeah, I have a little time in really talking about the energies. And that's fine. That's cool. I understand that you guys haven't been doing the transits as long as I have, so you don't have this same boringness factor. The things that I'm saying are maybe perhaps all new and fresh for you, and that's cool. But I particularly kind of feel like I have to have something more in order to get excited about what's going on there. And for me, I thought that thing could be actually looking at one of those names on the listing of the chart when we cross into a new cross. I've been trying to give you names of some famous people or important people in our history, planetary wise, that are carrying this energy. So I thought, well, let's look at some of those and see what we can see about how this person might be functioning. Of course, when it comes to famous people, it's a lot of projection that we're looking at. We don't necessarily know who a person is by being able to see their charts, but in some cases you definitely can get some energy. So a person I found to look at today is Amit Goswami, which means I do actually need to take the thing down. It's a lot of camera work here. I'm sorry, folks, for all this back and forthing, but I'm going to take off the camera again so that we can look at Amit Goswami, who carries this line 5 energy in the 44th gate area, and see what we see there. So here we are looking at it, and of course we do not have a time specifically for this person. That's usually what that means when it says 12 right there. But when I pull up the 9 charts, which is a scattering of charts throughout the whole entire day, you can see that this chart is actually fairly stable. That you can see that by seeing that these actually look very, very similar to each other. They're all S's, which is Specialist, Manifesting Generator. And we can see that at the very beginning of this day, this person would have a 4-6 or a 4-1, but it's very much more likely from 6 o'clock in the morning. So if they were born after 6 o'clock in the morning, anytime in the rest of the day, they're going to be carrying that 5-1. So it's quite likely that we're looking at a 5-1 here. And we see, of course, that 44-5 and 24-5, which are going to be greatly flavoring this person's life. And that's because when we look at a chart, these top 4 gate activations are composing approximately 70% of the neutrino energy that is entering this person's body as an imprint through the stream. So they're really going to be living most of all these 2 activations, which are their conscious activations. And then, of course, here we have the 7 and the 13. The 7 looking forward and the 13 looking backward on a very foundational level. So that's going to be something that's very important for this person. Now, in this case, Amit Goswami is I believe, a nuclear physicist and also some sort of a mystic. You can come down here in information, and a lot of this is in German. That's fine, but we see here in English. Yeah. Theoretical nuclear physicist and mystic. Interestingly enough, University of Oregon. for theoretical physics. So right actually in my neighborhood. And we see the transpersonal cross of incarnation in the third quarter here. Okay, so let's look at some details here while we have some time. This person is a split definition. You can see that in the chart here because their connections of their energy runs from the mind in a double channel. That's an interesting connection there, especially when he's got two activations of the 24. Of course, that's his earth activation, what will be consciously grounding him. But on the unconscious side, he's going to be experimenting because that's our third line experimental number in Uranus, which is the planet and the activation that has to do with freedom and innovation and something unusual. So this person is gonna have really an unusual ability to use his mind, and I think we can definitely see that with having found a way to become both a mystic and a physicist. That's, I would call, definitely an unusual mental activation. And of course, since I'm just following my instincts here in what I'm choosing to look at first, I will have to say that anytime we see a double channel connecting two centers, we are looking at some unusual challenge or activations that are going on there. So that is a very interesting configuration we see going on in this person's mind. And then their route to the throat is through telling stories. And that's perhaps how we get a mystical connection. I think I've read a book by this person because this name seems super familiar, but I can't remember exactly. I haven't looked it up. I really wanted to do a cold reading of this chart for you. So I'm talking about the nature of the split definition. That's what I'm swinging around to. We see their energy is very well connected in the mind and the head to the crown and then to the throat. Fine. And then it's connected down to the emotional center. So this would be an emotional person. And I believe that's emotional all day long. Let's double check that. Sure enough, it is emotional all day long. And then, so the 1222, this is the channel of gracious communication for those of you others who have this channel. The 12 is cautious communication, so it's coming out of the throat. And this person will be experimenting with that because it's a third line, that 12th activation. And then the 22, the moods of, being in the mood to listen or being in the mood to speak. That will be a fifth line activation. So that will be a very mature kind of listening that this person will be able to do. Which tracks, but I'm swinging around to split definition, which means here's their other area of definition. Through the 15.5, this is the channel of the wave, of being in the flow. This is a very primal kind of channel that's happening. It's a very logical channel that's establishing patterns for the future. So this is going to be with two fifth gate activations, a person who is used to waiting for the results. Ooh, they're both line 4. So interpersonal waiting. Interesting. And this is a person who in their life is really going to have a place for everything and everything needing to be in its place in order for them to function optimally. And then we see that these areas do not connect here. So this person is going to have the tendency to really lean on that 33rd gate activation and on the 31st, which is wanting to be a leader and wanting to be in retreat, spend time in private, in meditation. So that makes a lot of sense. The other gate that would really get this connection made for this person is gate 59. So this is going to be another bridging gate for them, which is going to make that energy flow. So they're going to be interested in the nature of what it's like to connect in an intimate way with other people. Really. And let's see what their 6th gate activation is, because that will tell us where the resonance is. 2. Interesting. So they're going to resonate with the shy, bold, connecting strategy. Yeah, interesting. 5-1 as a profile for this person. So they're really going to be very mature in their ability to organize others and in their ability to think about things. And they're really going to want to get to the foundation, down to the bottom of what it is to be looking at leadership roles and to be looking at what we learned from the past. Now, Ross says that these people, specifically with this Incarnation Cross, that they're going to be carrying some kind of energy from the past. So these are the kinds of people that have a hobby or an interest or a fascination or a skill that is specifically coming out of some other lifetime, some other era, and they're bringing it here to be sort of a reminder of what it is that's going on for us in our lives today. Isn't that kind of an interesting aspect? I thought so. Of course, there is a ton more that I could say about this chart and about this person, but I just wanted to give a brief overview of looking at what that's like. It's a very interesting exercise. At least it's much more interesting for me than just barely covering the definitions of what's going on there, showing what it's like when it actually gets into a human form and we see a person that we maybe know a little bit about, or at least that we can research something about and find out about how their life has gone for them and how these activations have played out in their life. Of course, I have to say, it always makes a difference on how much homework a person has done. And I think by the time you have a design of somebody, especially who's a 5-1, they're going to be perhaps more likely to have done their homework than not. And of course, when I say doing their homework, I mean doing the job that we all have in this life of looking at ourselves, examining ourselves, overcoming our traumas, and recognizing how they might have, bent and molded and shaped our personalities to be something that is perhaps not in the original out of the box form. Yeah. So this person's chirons will have formed them, which in this case it is, I have to trust the facts more than my intuition and my inner wisdom. So to say that he became a mystic is to say that he probably found a way to connect to his inner intuition and wisdom rather than just being a facts kind of dude. And it's an interesting thing when we see this combination of physics and consciousness explorations. This is the same combination that we see in Tom Campbell that brought us My Big Toe and all that is now, hitting the world in a more wide way or becoming a fad just now. I think that's awesome. I don't know exactly what direction that's going to go, but it is definitely the time for us globally to be bringing these things together, which were in the past seen as woo-woo and weirdo and pseudoscience. But the more of these people we see that are doing both sides, physics and looking into the nature of consciousness, we see that they're actually coming together. And that's, of course, the whole entire purpose of quantum physics, is to teach us exactly how they come together in a mathematical way. And I'm pretty sure that Amit Goswami has been looking at that and realizing that the end results of synthesizing that information are that it's mathematically more useful and less expenditure of energy from the universe to have each of the bits and pieces, each of the gears and cogs in this machine of our whole entire planet to be moving according to love rather than fear. It's math now. It works. So it's a sort of a bringing together. This is a perfect example of someone who is right at that intersection of science and magic, bringing it together and seeing, oh, okay, what was before seen as very, a magical, weird, woo-woo kind of stuff can now start to be explained in terms of math, physics, science. It's a real thing, and it has a lot of implications for how we are now and understanding ourselves and understanding the energies that are coming for us in the future, which is exactly why I do transits, so that we can really look at the details of, okay, now that we have the ability to see these things from this perspective of science, what does the brand new science tell us about the future? How can we know about what's coming for us so that we can be more prepared for it? And that's what all this is about. On each one of its levels, it depends on how far you engage with it. So for those of you who are really looking at it, tracking the transits every day, keeping a journal, understanding your moods for each day so that when we swing around again, you can start to do a personal level of pattern recognition. You folks are going to be getting a lot more out of it than somebody who is not watching it at all or just watching on a very light level. It's very interesting to see how much wisdom people are actually picking up and gaining from the different levels of interaction that they are doing with the information. But to each their own, and I have to say, it's not like the times are past. The dates are past, but each person who comes to this information can actually go back, and I'm going to be renaming the transits with the cross information, so that, let's say you have the cross of incarnation and you're just coming into it now, you go, okay, there's a transit about me right now, but the one that was previous is also really going to be talking about that same energy, just a different flavor, and that reading that different flavor might give me insight into what my transit and my cross is doing right now. So I'll be changing the names of those so that those can be listed so that people don't just think that, oh, the date's passed, there's nothing in that transit that has information for me now. They actually are still relevant, so it's worth going back and looking at what some of those previous ones were to give insight into what's going on now. So that's it for today. Come back tomorrow. We're going to talk about that 6th line and Matthew McConaughey. Yeah. All right. Ciao.